Hi everybody, and welcome to Britain's Hidden History live show from a gloriously sunny South Wales. Today we have not just Arnie playing his violin, but also a video of Xavi and Leon playing the piano. Great work getting the videos to me, Angie. On the show today we have two videos, one from Ross from the 10-minute or less video playlist, and a presentation by Bob Morgan on the Ford of the Soldiers located up on Mynydd y Gaer. In the news this week, Adrian has pointed out that Alan Wilson appeared on BBC TV 40 years ago in 1983 to announce to the world of his and Tony's discovery of the real King Arthurs. I can remember reading of the reports in the papers and eventually wondered where the fact of the discovery disappeared to. Well, it's no longer disappeared, and as David Ewin sang, Rynny Hummer o hyd, we are still here. Angie has news. Cymroglyphics are digitalising Artorius Rex discovered and the three major big black books. They'll all be available as PDF files on cymroglyphics.com. I think we all know how to spell that by now. And that may be available in 2 to 3 weeks' time. We're also considering print editions based on demand. So if you'd like a digitalised version of one of the big black books, let Angie know. If you'd like a print copy of a new run of a big black book, be a smaller black book, let Angie know. Stay tuned for updates. And there was also the 17th century dictionary made available by Angie as a PDF file recently. So that's a very worthwhile research tool. And David Mosley has just referred to another reprint of a very old Welsh dictionary that came out on Facebook today. So this time, correctly, over to Arnie, Xavi and Leon to kick us off. Oh, and by the way, thank you very much to Leon for sorting out the error of last week's late start. Who sorted out today's error then? Thank you, boys. Great to see such talent developing, isn't it? Now, in the comments from the YouTube channel during the past week, we had a number of interesting comments, and here's a selection. Peter Chesborough: don't forget Dartmoor's tin reserves, Rob. Maybe we should say Dumnonia's tin reserves. Britain's mining history is incredible and key to understanding Cymric history in Wales and the West Country, and their relationship with the Middle East in ancient times. Great video, folks. And Peter also pointed out that Devon got a mention later. Marshall Abrahams said, this makes a really first-class standalone video, particularly with the breathtaking drone footage and John's narration. Enjoyed seeing this very much. So that was parts 1 and 2 of the road trip videos. Peter Wan from Scotland: now I'm thinking historically Enkidu would have been a druid. It fits more than the present theory of his creation, or the text hasn't been translated properly. A little bit more information on that one, please, Better. I'm not so up to date with all the history. So I don't think we have anyone responding to comments officially, but keep them coming in, as individual BHH supporters will reply, and this may lead to interesting debate. And I think I saw on one of the chats there was 10 responses, but I seem to have lost that one thereafter. So the evening has officially started, and now we'll watch the first video with Ross talking about the Saxon leader Hengist, also known as Horsa. I need to pay attention because I'm hearing conflicting things in my mind as to these two guys, or one guy's name.
Today we're doing some English history. It's not just about Wales, all right? This is more to do with England and Scotland and how that interplays with Britain. And what we're looking at is these two sort of characters, really, who've become sort of semi-mythical, legendary figures, Hengist and Horsa, who were supposed to just arrive like roving adventurers with 6,000 followers and carved out a kingdom. Whereas when you dig into the British history, and this is the point, to look at the British records and see what it says about what happened, and you'll find they actually are historical characters. And you can pretty firmly place who they are and what they're doing there, and who their ancestry is. So I'm going to have a little go at this. And I've got the notes here from Wilson and Blackett, done some brilliant research on this area. And the first thing you have to note is that you've got to trace the story back through the ancestors of Hengist and Horsa. And one of their key ancestors is someone called Geta, G-E-T-A. Now, Geta is a very interesting character, because if we go way back to the era about 193 to 211 AD, we have the Emperor Septimus Severus, who was British, and that's for another video. A lot of these so-called Roman emperors were actually British kings, sometimes just ruling Britain, sometimes Britain and Gaul and Spain, sometimes the whole empire, and in occasional interludes there'd be a Roman emperor ruling Britain, but only short bursts. It's not this 400 years continuous rule that we talk about. So what we're looking at is the first Saxons arriving is actually King Framer and the Alemanni around 398, and we've got more contact with them before that further north in Scotland, as we'll see. Now, around about 850, Nennius listed these 9 generations before Hengist. So in those days, these things were considered very important by the kings themselves, because that's how you justify your position. So if we go back then to Septimus Severus, you see in the centre, he's fought this war, and the evidence for this is that he's said to have fought Caledonians in Scotland, and one of the things he should be famous for is actually what's called Hadrian's War. Hadrian sort of marked out that border, if you like, as part of his negotiations with the British around about 125 AD, and it's actually Septimus Severus, much later, who came along and actually fortified it. So it should be Septimus's wall, if anything. So that's and the reason he's done this, and you'll see through reading the notes here in more detail, is he's been forced by this sort of Caledonian invasion to retreat the border from the centre of Scotland back down this line with a sort of Solway and Newcastle, where we know Hadrian's Wall is today. And what would seem to have happened then, to sort of make a deal, he has to make a peace treaty. As part of that treaty, he is then married, as you see on screen there, a daughter of Fulginius, who unfortunately we don't know her name, and their son was Geta. The complication comes in that he also has another son by a British princess, possibly called Marcia, and their son was Caracalla, who took on the alternative name Septimus Basanius, and he became an emperor of Rome as well. So the confusion is there that Caracalla would seem to have been concerned about his rival and the rival claim, and that's where we get a lot of the friction between those two. So we have a strange linking of names. So this British war around 205 to 211 AD, where we find a Fulginius and a Geta. And it's possible that this King Fulginius was the grandfather of Geta, the son of Severus the Emperor. Then in the ancestral lists of Hengist and Horsa, they themselves trace back to a Geta who had a son named Foligold. It's almost the same. Even better, the old stories relate to how when King Fulginius fought Septimus Severus, he went over to Scythia to get reinforcements for his army. As all the related Saxon, Alemanni, Vandals, Alans, Cadi, and other nations were Scythian in origin, this is important. And Scythia at this time probably meant Germany and Holland. Equally significant, this is when he moved the border further south. Right, Caracalla, by the way, is traditionally the first British emperor of Rome. So there is no question that northern Britain was the area of the Saxon, Irish, Scot, and later Scandinavian penetration, with King Fulginius fighting his way into the area and compelling Septimus Severus to withdraw the Roman frontiers, or the British frontiers, British Roman, for a distance of over 120 miles. There's every possibility that King Fulginius was a Saxon and that Geta was his grandson. And you have all this, the rigid caste system. The Saxons, the Germanic tribes, are just a rigid caste system and hereditary rules. You couldn't just roll up as an adventurer and be made king. So we have a quick look at the list that Nennius prepared around about 850 AD. Then we got Geta, who's probably the link then with the British. And there's the immediate heirs. We'll see that, Finn Mac Cool, who would have been sort of Irish Scots probably, fighting as auxiliary units along sort of Roman lines, which ties in with the British as well there. And that's probably the source of those stories, which are wonderful stories, by the way. I love, if you get the book The High Deeds of Finn Mac Cool by Rosemary Sutcliffe, I loved it when I was a boy, and I've read it to my own boys. It's great stories, and you could put those now into a historical framework. What might surprise some people who haven't followed the channel, or the works of Wilson and Blackett, is then you have the arrival of the Mercians, who were the Vandals. The Vandals, yes. After charging down through Italy and ended up in North Africa, eventually they get kicked out by forces coming from Constantinople, and they disappear from history. Some say they drifted into the Berbers and whatever. What you'll find is this is when they appear, first of all, in Ireland and across to Britain, where King Arthur chases them across, and it's recorded in the Mabinogi as the pursuit of the Great Boar being the Mercian kings. So you can trace all this back to British history as well. So if you're a Mercian, you're probably a Vandal, if you're in that area, okay? And then we get to Hengist and Horsa, and then we got the descendants, such as the one who fought against King Arthur, the Battle of Baden, about 520 AD. I think that date might shift a bit. And then descendants coming down further than that. Now, one of the key things to think about when you look at the story of Hengist and Horsa is they are said to be brought in by the treacherous Vortigern, Gwythain, the British king, and he has got a ton of stories all to himself. And he created this civil war where he tried to usurp the British throne, and he brought in reinforcements to help him. And this has been taken as the arrival of the Anglo-Saxons, if you like. But if you look, and they were supposed to be the ones guarding this sort of northeast border. But if you look, where were they stationed? They were stationed in Kent. They become the origin of the Kent kings. That's where this is described as the Kentish kings. And any first glance at a map, you can see they are clearly not there defending against Saxons' invasions from the northeast, or sorry, this way as you look. They are there to protect against an attack across from the south, which would be Brittany, which is where you had British forces who were going to try and invade to restore the British king, the authentic British king who should have been on the throne. So that's how they fit into the story. But they're not from nowhere, they're not legends, they're not fiction, they are historical. And it all ties in with treating British historical records more seriously and not just dismissing them as myth and legend. So I hope you enjoyed that. I look forward to the next one. And blessings and peace to you, which in Wales you say heddwch.
Thank you, Ross. You're a hard act to follow, but you've given us so much to build upon. I'm sure there's others out there who could make similar video shorts for the channel. It's easy to get them to me via WeTransfer, for example. Just message me on the BHH Facebook page and find me under members and I'll give you my email address. Or maybe just ask me to arrange a Zoom session with you, which can be recorded, if I remember to press record. I was about to introduce the short music interlude, which was Bethan B. Parker, David Parker's daughter, and her band State of Fame. State of Fame, the band members there really appreciated Bethan hitting that high I note. And that was Eye of the Tiger. Hopefully it came through all right. So Bethan, I think she's under Bethan Parker, or you could try State of Fame. They have numerous performances recorded on their YouTube channel. So check them out. There's a wide selection of different practice songs, individual songs by Bethan, and of course the group's songs that she's been in, not just State of Fame, but they're very talented, aren't they? So now we arrive at the time to play our main feature, which is a presentation given by Bob Morgan via a Zoom event a week Friday gone, which was open to all to attend on the night. Ross talked about Hengist Horsa, to place him or them as an historical character, and here he is as a main player in the heinous crime of the treachery of the Long Knives. Bob Morgan leads us through the topography of Mynydd y Gaer to locate the most likely place of the peace conference and Saxon campsite. The names of places on Mynydd y Gaer preserve the history, and Bob focuses on the Ford of the Soldiers. In describing the topography and hearing what the landscape speaks to, startling conclusions are drawn about the event and the possible identity of the perpetrator. Paul Hartel introduced Bob and led the subsequent discussion. I've included a small portion of the discussion today because of time constraint, but I'll put out the full discussion with Bob's presentation again during the week as a standalone video. Over to you, Bob.
Right. Well, we are all gathered here today because Bob Morgan is going to give us a presentation about an area of Mynydd y Gaer, right?
Right. The subject of tonight's presentation is the Rhyddid Milwer, basically the Ford of the Soldiers. This is on Mynydd y Gaer, and it's one of these ignored, overlooked, and seldom visited features visited by the British Hidden History members. But yet it plays a significant part in Wilson and Blackett's account of Mynydd y Gaer. And it's a feature that I myself, every time I went out to Mynydd y Gaer, I always said I must go and look at it, and then got caught up in looking at other things and ignored it. But one day Ross and I did go out and have a look at it. And because it plays a part in the Wilson and Blackett account, it needs to be looked at, checked, and verified, because we just can't sit back and accept whatever Wilson and Blackett say as being correct. We must go out and check it. When we go out and check it, more often than not, we actually we verify it and find out that what they've said is correct. So the importance and the reason why the Ford is important is the treachery of the Long Knives. Wilson and Blackett identified Mynydd y Gaer as being Caer Caradog, and as such, this was the venue for the mid-5th century. Most people, I think Wilson Blackett put it at 466 AD, where a peace conference was held between the Britons and the Saxons, and the Saxons ended up slaughtering 363 British lords and nobles. The story goes that Vortigern, who was the High King of Britain at the time, brought in Saxon forces under Hengist and Horsa to act as mercenaries in his battles with the Picts and the Gaels. And in turn for their services, Horsa and Hengist were allowed to settle in the Isle of Thanet. However, Vortigern lusted after Rowena, Hengist's beautiful daughter, and in return for her hand in marriage, he allowed the Saxons to increase their numbers and gave them the kingdom of Kent. Now, Vortimer, Vortigern's son, according to Wilson and Blackett, a lot of authorities dispute that he was his son, but and didn't have any relation. But anyway, the name is there. Vortimer then actually started to fight against the Saxons because there were large numbers of them coming into the southeast of the country. Vortimer was poisoned by Rowena, according to the documentation, which comes back to the fact that he was probably Vortigern's son, and Horsa was killed in the fighting that was going on. The wily Hengist cajoled Vortigern to convene a peace conference with the Saxons, between the Britons and the Saxons, and his sales pitch was that the Saxons and Britons would all sit down together, unarmed, have a great big huge group hug, drink large quantities of beer, indulge in endless rounds of mutual backslapping, and henceforth agree to live together in peace and harmony. But the Saxons had a dark ulterior motive and agenda. This isn't what they were really after. The Saxons turned up to the conference with knives hidden within their boots. So, and that raises one question: is how big were these knives if you could hide them in a boot? It always says the treachery of the long knives. How they must have been quite high boots if you could slip a long knife into them. Anyway, the Saxons turned up with their knives in their boots, and during the conference, the Saxons ensured that the Brits drank far too much beer, and at the prearranged signal from Hengist, each Saxon took out their knife and stabbed the unarmed Briton next to him. Wilson and Blackett then say that some of the Britons tried to run away from this bloodfest and via the ford of the soldiers, but they were caught at the ford by the Saxons, who summarily slaughtered them, and the stream ran red with their blood. The Saxons spared Vortigern because of his marriage to Rowena and to use him for ransom purposes. Only one other Briton survived, Alden, who was Earl of Gloucester, who used a wooden stake, and I'm probably thinking it was perhaps a tent pole or something along those lines, and he fought his way of freedom with it and escaped. And he had his revenge subsequently because Vortigern was subsequently killed and followed on. But the whole of the treachery of long knives is an issue, is a subject for a presentation in its own right. This is a quick highlights of what happened, because it is all supposed to have happened on Mynydd y Gaer. So the first thing then is where is the ford? So on this map extract from the Ordnance Survey, I've taken it and I've highlighted the key Wilson and Blackett features. You got St. Peter's Church. Oh, if I got my hair over here, and then you got I've got all you people in my right hand lane, but beyond there, I don't know whether you can see it, is the boat-shaped mound, the Pass of the Soldier, and this Taff Ely Ridgeway walk, which goes along here, is the old parish road, and that was effectively the M4 motorway of its day. That was a very busy ancient thoroughfare. Then you've got the road that we normally use to access St. Peter's from the west, coming up here and up over the top. That again is an old ancient trackway. And then you've got the hill fort here, Coed Caer, which in some olden books is actually referred to as Caer Caradoc. And then the ford is actually in this little valley here. And when you look at it, you've got a stream coming down here. You've got a stream coming down here with this hill here, and then the stream goes on further down. And when you look at it, this forms a bit of a link with St. Peter's, as we'll see. If we look at it on
now, can you go back 1 second, Bob? before we exit this screen, can you give us an idea of the distances between some of these landmarks? Like, how long would it take you, for instance, to walk from St. Peter's over to this area here, to the ford or something?
If you were walking there, it's probably about at least 2.5 kilometers to get to the fort from St. Peter's. So you know that's like just over a mile and a half. It'd probably take you 20 minutes, half an hour to walk there.
Okay, so we're looking at a couple of kilometers distance between where St. Peter's is. And okay.
And the other strange thing is when you're up on Mynyddig, and it always amazes me, there are very few places that you can actually see St. Peter's Church from. You're up on the mountain and you keep on looking for St. Peter's Church, and it's always hidden. And there is no direct line of sight from the hill fort here to St. Peter's Church. St. Peter, because it's actually hidden by a little bit of a mound around this area here. So if there was any kind of signaling between the church and the hill fort, there would have to be some intermediate or some other way of doing it. It would have to come in via a third site. If we look at it on Google Earth, looking at that doesn't mean much. So what I've done is then I've overlaid the key features. So if we look at the top, we're starting with Tuain Caradoc, his burial mound, which unfortunately today, with the times I've been up there, I've not been able to discern it in the landscape because it was a very low. If you look at the description in the Candu description, it was only about 0.5 meter high and about 8-10 meters in diameter. And it seems now to have been eroded to the point where you can't really see it, but it's marked on old maps going back for years. You got the old parish road, which is the normal way if we're coming in from the west that we approach St. Peter's along this road. I mountain biked on it since the 1970s. And it's a very ancient road. As I said, it was the M4 motorway of its day. Then you've got St. Peter's Church and the boat-shaped mound. And another important one then is the Pass of the Soldier, which goes up to and provides another route from north to south. And the Pass of the Soldier would have continued down this route down here to Lambad Vow Farm down here and then further down. And then of course you got the current road, with the current tarmac road here, which again is an ancient route over the mountaintop and the hill fort here. If you look at it on LiDAR, you can see the terrain in much more detail. And again, I've overlaid the key points on it. So you can see that the old parish road, for example, comes around and it does a bit of a contouring job round the hills, keeping it more or less the same level. It dips down at this point of necessity because of the valley, and then it contours around this hill around here to join up with this road, and then goes on further west. You've got St. Peter's Church over there. The Pass of the Soldier again is going out further north, and then you've got this pathway here, which comes down to the ford and leads on, and then it goes on, and today it goes on as a bridle way and footpath down this way. But at the time, you would have then just come straight across here to the hill fort. If you go look back on that one again, no, you go that. But the thing about the ford is, if you look at it, you can see it comes down from it's in a little valley, and there's like a spring head here where the water comes down. It follows down here, and then it's joined with this other stream coming down here. So that forms like a barrier if you're going north, or if you try and go north from the hill fort, and then the stream then runs down, follows down through these hills down here, down there. So if you look at it, the hill fort is separated from all the activity around St. Peter's Church, the Path of the Soldier, Mynydd Portreff, where all the activity is that one of the, that Wilson Blackett say is all on Mynydd Gair. It's all around this area here. But the hill fort here is separated from these deep incised valleys. The hill fort here is one of the reasons it's here is, as you can see, it's on the end of a large bit of a ridge coming out, and it's overlooking this road here. So it's one of the outposts guarding the whole of Mynydd Gair. And, you know, all of the activity is up here. It's one of the outposts guarding one of the main accesses to get up onto the mountain. So if you were approaching Mynydd Gair, you would probably come up this road here, get onto the old parish road to get there, or you would come up this steeper route, which is the one coming up through then the valley and to join up with the House of the Soldiers. And this is actually a much steeper route than where the road goes. As you can see, the road takes advantage of the terrain and contours around the. It goes to the head of this little valley and contours around it and avoids it, rather than the Roman road, which would go straight through the middle and they build a causeway or something through it. If we look at the ford itself, this is a view looking south, and this is the photograph here has flattened this out. This is extremely steep. This is a new modern pathway coming down from the top of the hill. And then going up, this is more. You can see the original route went through here, and they've contoured round there to get vehicles, quad bikes, and things up onto the mountain now. But this section here is the old route going up here, and what you can see on the horizon here is the hill fort. And again, if we look at it, this is now looking north. This is the new track that's been put in, basically, or been created by the use of four-wheel drives and quad bikes. This is the ford, but the old track went up that way to St. Peter's. So you would come down from the hill fort here, cross the ford, and then go up to St. Peter's. And again, looking at view to the south, you can see how extensive the ford is. It's quite shallow, but it's quite wide. You can look at it. And in most conditions, you're going to get your feet wet walking through it. Why is the ford there? Why is it there? And so we know where it is. Why is it there? And the reason it's there is all down to terrain. And this is why I keep on looking at landscapes as a surveyor. And this is obvious one to me. This is looking now east. The hill fort is, you can't see it, but is up in this quadrant here, up in the right-hand corner. The St. Peter's and the other things, Path of the Soldiers, is just behind the hill, over that direction up there in that quarter. And I'm looking east now, down the small Cwm Valley, which separates the north from the south. And the actual ford is here. And you can see the track then going up, which eventually comes out up by the hill fort. And what you've got basically is two funnels. That land funnels out in both directions like this, and this is all boggy ground, right? And if you look at it again further, you can see what happens. All of this stuff here with all the tumps and hills here, coming around here all the way around there. If you try to walk on that, you're going to sink up to your ankles or more in mud and water. So, and the same thing happens the other side. Although I didn't take any photographs, and I should have done. But it opens out into a funnel that way as well. There's similar ground. The only point, and you go back to the pictures of the ford, the only point that you can cross there without going through those boggy areas is through this ford here, where it's a natural pinch point in the Cwm, and then it widens. It comes in from where all the water's coming out from the mountain, comes down to a point, and then it funnels back out again. And at this very point, that's where the ford is located. So in landscape terms, in topography terms, it's the natural bridging point, to get from one side of the hill to the other, across that valley. Any other place you're going to try and get across that valley, you're going to sink up to your knees in mud and water. And believe me, I've tried it. So if we then look at, this is the hill fort, right? And we're coming back then to where Wilson and Blackett, if you go back to some of these photographs here, Wilson and, I can't point you out because you're all there, but Wilson and Blackett say everything was happening up here around St. Peter's Church, up in this right-hand corner. You got the Pass of the Soldier, St. Peter's, the church, Mynydd Portreff, where they're supposed to be, housing the villagers. In this location around here, you've got what they term to be a castle, or what they presume to be a castle, remains. So everything was happening up in this quadrant, and this was really just an outpost hill fort. But so as a result of that, if you then look at the Holy Kingdom book, and it's they got a section on page 214, which is treachery of the peace conference. And basically what they're saying there is the peace conference was held around the church, and they refer to in the descriptions in the Holy Kingdom, they refer to things such as the field of drunk and helplessness, the Pass of the Soldier, etc. All of those are located, or supposedly located, around St. Peter's Church. And that implies, and the implication is quite clear in here, that somewhere around there is where the conference was held. And as a surveyor, I don't think that's what happened. I think we should look into this a little bit more deeper. And the way that I've approached it is basically, imagine that you're a 5th century events manager, and Vortigern has come to you and said, arrange me a conference, right? Yeah, I'm going to have a peace conference with Vortigern wants a peace conference, arrange me a conference. Okay, so if you're an events manager, you immediately got a whole list of questions that you want answered before you even start to think about organizing it. First question is, how many people are going to be attending? What am I doing? 10, 20, 100, 1,000? And the thing is, in all of the books and documentation relating to the put down in history about the treachery of the Long Knives, no one has ever mentioned a figure of how big this conference was, but we have some clues. The first clue is in the book here. Wilson and Blackett saying 363 Saxon lords were killed. 363 British nobles and lords were killed by the Saxons. And also in the story, the Saxons came armed with their knives, and at the sign from Hengist, they had to stab the Briton that was next to them. So from that, we can at least assume that there were 363 Saxon lords and 363 British lords. So that's giving you like somewhere around 750 people. So you need a venue which can hold 750 people at least for a conference. Now the issue then is support staff. All of these people attending this conference are all lords, nobles, or kings, and they've got, and what they've all got large entourages and hangers on and people like that. You've got cooks, dressers, servers, interpreters, bards. You've got the flunky who puts the toothpaste on your toothbrush and then wipes your backside. If you're a lord, you've got all of those people who are coming with them. So it's not just the 363 Saxons who are coming for this conference. They're going to be bringing their attendants with them, and similarly, the 363 lords from Britain will be bringing their attendants. Now, if you start looking at that, well, how many would each of them bring? Well, they could bring hundreds, 20, 30, 40 for each lord. And that would put the numbers up hugely. What I would say is that there has to be some kind of practical limit on this. The Saxons are coming over from England. So they're traveling, they're going to arrive here. They can't bring lots of people with them. One of the other big things, if you were doing the conference, is how are we going to feed all these people? One roast hog is not going to be suffice. How many sort of animals have we got killed to fill all this host of people? So I think there would have to be some kind of practical limit. So you would, there's nothing in the history to help us, because no one ever mentions the number that attended the conference. But what I would say is we make some assumptions. So if there have to be some kind of practical limit. They would all come over, each of these lords and nobles would probably come over with at least 10 to a dozen people. So if you got, say, 750 lords attending, they got total then support team of 10 times that, So you're talking in the region of about 4,000 to 5,000 people in total. So you would need to find accommodation for 4,000 to 5,000 people. You need to find a venue where you could have the conference with the 750 lords, where they would all be present to witness and have a say in what's going on. So once you start doing that, I start out as a surveyor. Then I start looking at the landscape, and one of the things that strikes me immediately is if you look at the landscape all around this area here, where St. Peter's Church is. It's all very hilly. There's not many flat spots. If you're going to accommodate all these people, the only accommodation, the practical accommodation for such a large number is going to be tents. And if you haven't been camping, what you want when you put up your tent, you want a flat level spot. Well, around St. Peter's, there's not that many flat level spots. And again, if you start putting some kind of figures to what you're looking for, I keep going back down to this guy who's analysed all of the Roman forts. He analysed every single Roman fort, small forts, large forts, and things, and came out with a figure of that each of these forts, when they had inside the fort, you'd have to have your tents, you'd have to have latrines, you have to have cooking areas, you have to have latrines and things like that. And he's worked it out and analysed. He spent years, about 20, 30 years, analysing every single Roman fort detail he could get his hands on. And he's came out with a figure of about 690 people per hectare. Now, if we base everything on that kind of figure, which is justified by this guy's 20 years research, and it wouldn't be out of I wouldn't say I won't say we can put 100% reliance on it, but it's at least a rule that we can start looking at. If you're trying to accommodate 4,500 people, you're going to need about 6.5 acres of flattish space where you can put your tents. And as I argued with Ross, you ain't going to find it up here. You ain't going to find it up around St. Peter's. So I don't believe that that's where the conference was held. Again, if you go back to that, we go through the ford itself. This is the old care, and I believe when you look at this is where the actual conference, where the 750 lords and nobles was held, because that fort encompasses an area of about 1 hectare. So you can get 690 people in it set up as a campsite. So if you can get 690 people in it set up as a campsite, according to the guy who's done all the analysis on the Roman forts, you can certainly get 750, 800, perhaps 1,000 people in there just set up as a conference venue. And what I would suggest would happen is you probably have tents all around the perimeter inside the compound to provide shelter in weather, and you leave a big circular area out in the middle where you would have the conference, and all the lords would get in there. The rest of their entourage would be left outside, all the lords would get in there, and then that's where the business would be done. That's where the talks would be having, and that's where the ale would be consumed in large quantities, whilst they did all the backslapping and saying what good fellows they were and how we were going to live in peace thereafter. On the photograph here, you can see Steve there and myself there. So down the middle of the fort, just as a point of interest, you can see this line, and that wasn't originally there. That's a more modern field boundary that's been put in. And if you look on Google Earth, it used to have a hedge along there, which has all been taken out. So presumably Cadbury or someone has had words with the farmer to take it out to restore it back to how it should be. So I believe that that's the venue where you had the conference, not at St. Peter, anywhere around St. Peter's. Now, if you're going to do that, start looking again at the terrain and the topology. You need now a campsite for 4,500 people, which are just the Saxon entourage. The British entourage, I believe, would have been housed up where they would be housed, up on Moniz-Portreff, and all around St. Peter's. So I don't believe you need to provide accommodation for those. You would just need to provide accommodation for the Saxons. So we're looking at 6.5 acres. And look, lo and behold, we have a nice flat ridge which runs from this road here, which provides ready access to the campsite from the plain below. And lo and behold, it's about 6.5 acres. So you could get all of your Saxons put into tents onto that piece of land. And I'm sure Steve will recall when we went out there. Today, that's flat, closely cropped grass, and it's like a big flat. You're on a ridge, heading from the road down southeast towards the care down here, and it's big, flat, it's broad, flattish, and it slopes down. But it hasn't got such a slope on it that it would prohibit you putting tents on it. In fact, it's the ideal campsite. And I would argue this is the only campsite on Money the Gare where you could put 4,500 people, because it's also not just flat and level, it's actually sheltered. If you look from these higher hills, you've got the ridge line running down here, the flattish ridge down here. And you've got these higher hills here providing shelter to it, because this is a much lower, it's probably about 60, 70 meters lower. So it's sheltered as well. Ideal campsite. Again, yeah, there you are. And then if the conference was held there, and the massacre occurred there as well, you've then got a ready route of 1.5 kilometers up to where the bodies are supposed to be buried, which is up on the Monument Amelia, up on top of the hill, the highest part of Money the Gare. And you can see the route there is quite a feasible route for heavily laden carts with bodies, because you haven't got any great steep slopes. It comes up and it takes advantage of the terrain. And once you get up to this point, you're on fairly flat, flattish. It's rising, but at a low slope up to the actual burial point. If you were coming from St. Peter's, it's about 3 or 4 times as long a distance to bring those bodies. So again, from that point of view, it makes more sense that the massacre happened where it did. One of the other issues, if you're providing a Glastonbury of the day, like Glastonbury does now, you have to have security. You don't. What you want is you've invited 4,500, 5,000 Saxons into your country. And I'm maintaining one of the reasons why you would hold it down here, not St. Peter's, is you would want to keep those Saxons at a distance. You'd also want to keep them corralled in. So you wouldn't invite them to where you are, or where you've got all your permanent accommodation up around St. Peter's and Moniz-Portreff. You're separated from them by this great big huge valley here, which we can see has got in the bottom, has got sort of bog and morass, and the only one bridging point is the ford. So what you would do during the conference would be you would make certain that people who aren't invited can't get in, which is what they do at Glastonbury. If you haven't got a ticket, no entry, mate. Keep you out. So you've got two functions with security. One is to keep the outsiders from coming and intruding into the conference. You don't want people super gluing themselves to, some part of the hill fort or something like that in protest at what you're doing. And the other part of security is you also want to keep the Saxons contained. You want to know where they are, and you want to be able to control their movements so that they can't come out there and spy on you, or they can't come up and do a sneak attack from the rear and that kind of thing. And again, if you have the conference where I'm suggesting you have it on this ridge, you would put a security force along the ford on the northern side of the ford to stop people crossing the ford and going up that way. You put a bit of an owl thing here along the road and block off access so they can't get to the north, go up the road and then across the old parish road. And also it stops them from stops the Saxons then from going out westwards along this ridge line, along the ridge line up to the top of Money de Gair and out towards the west. And if anyone's gone up this road, you know that you get to a certain point where there's a cattle grid and you're in a bit of a hollow around there. You're in a holloway. And that's another natural place. Then if you put a security force around that little holloway there, you can actually then block access. You can block people coming up to join the conference, and you can block people leaving the conference. And again, on this side here, you've got slopes down to the road. So it's quite a well protected thing. Now, looking from the road, if you go back, I'll show you where. Looking from the road towards the castle from this point here, you get this view, and you can see the wide, flat, short crop grass, which is where I'm suggesting the tents, the Saxon tents, would be placed, like that. And to me, there's no other place you could hold a conference on Money de Gair. You haven't got everything that this has got going for you. Wilson and Blackett clearly imply in this book that it was held somewhere around St. Peter's. But I'm arguing that purely as a surveyor, on topographic grounds, you can't do it. There's no place where you can have 4,500 tents put up in one location. You would have to split them up into groups. And once you start splitting them up into groups, you've got a bigger security problem, because you then have to provide security around each of those groups. Your security numbers would increase. I think that this is the ideal location for conference. If it ever took place on Money de Gair, it took place here, I would argue. So I think the conclusion really is, we're back to, if the peace conference took place, I think it's perfectly feasible and practical to hold the peace conference on Money de Gair, but only in that location. And I would argue strongly that that's where it was held. But this is Britain's hidden history. As always, we have more questions than answers. So the first question I've got is, why was the peace conference held in South Wales rather than England? And when you start to think about that one, that's an interesting one. I do have my own answer to that one. But you guys think about it, and I'd be glad to hear your ideas on it. The next question is, how did the Saxons get to the conference? By land or by sea? By land, it would be pretty risky for the Saxons, because they're penetrating well into Welsh occupied lands. So they put themselves at risk. If they come by sea, where did they land? Because if you bring in 4,500 people, that implies you've got, a maximum in those days of about 100 persons per boat. That implies so quite a large number of boats. So you would need, a big place to land. But the big question, the big unanswered question is, having killed off the entire British nobility in one go, why didn't they just stay and occupy South Wales? Because that's not what happened. You know, they killed all of the British nobles, and then they went back to England. Why? Now that's a big question, and I open that one out to discussion, because there's got to be an answer to that. I got some thoughts on it, but that is a really big question. If, as Wilson Blackett alleged, this is where the peace conference was held, they killed out all the British nobles, that was their intent, why didn't they just occupy, do what everyone else would do, the Romans and the Normans, just occupy South Wales? So here is endeth the lesson.
Okay. Thank you.
Keith wants to say something. He's raised his hand physically.
Right. Can't see him.
Couple of things. One of the things is, I've not read about this. I know it happened, but I haven't read anything about it. So I'm coming from it from ignorance. Who was the British king at the time, or the Welsh, the man in charge in that location?
It would have been Vortigern and Hengist on the Saxon side.
Right. So the question I've got is, you leave 400 or 500 people in, whatever it was, or more, and there's no protection there. I don't think that would have happened somehow. It sounds like it was a trap. It sounds like it was a trap by maybe Vortigern, because he was given all the protection, but he didn't give anything, did he? At the end of the day, because even after they killed him, where did the Saxons go?
That to me is the biggest question.
Well,
having killed all of the Welsh or the British nobles and lords, which was the intent of Hengist by doing this despicable act.
I can give you the answer on that.
Go on then.
Vortigern arranged it all.
Right.
And when all the Saxons just went away, because it was part of their domain, then there was no need, because they had Vortigern. It was simple.
I had the same thought, Keith.
Yes, there's no other way.
Exactly the same thought, because my thought is that would answer Bob's question of like, well, what happens afterwards?
It was treachery by our king.
Well, right, and I mean, we know from the histories that he wasn't well liked, right, and that
you get rid of your enemies, give them a night out to stab them.
Yeah, that he was rather despised. So you can imagine that he would have a motive to sort of do away with other native, Britons who might be in conflict with him, or potential conflict with him, or
is the same problem with me.
well, even vie for the throne. So
yeah.
So I mean, whether he planned it out himself, or obviously he involved.
If I said to you, Paul, if I said to you, and we're enemies, we've been fighting each other for hundreds of years, and I say to you, "Oh, come along and leave all your armor there, leave everything there. You can have a drink up here with us, the boys." And before, it couldn't have come from the Saxons. It had to be from Vortigern. I'll look after you. You were secure. You can leave everything at home, because I got all my guards on. Don't worry. And they weren't there, were they? Obviously.
And that might also explain, Bob, the question of why they did it there, as opposed to, I mean, the other thing to realize too is that I think still at this point, right, there are no English kingdoms, right? It's all Britain, right? It hasn't been subdivided. So it's just that they hold it in territory we now think of as Wales, but at the time it was still.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So they hold it here maybe because, it's just closer to some of the native kingdoms, closer to the native kingdoms that they want to lure. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think Vortigern obviously had to be involved, and so he's not just spared because he's married to Rowena.
Well, yeah, he certainly paid the price for it, because at the end of the day, they did hunt him down and kill him. So
if they came by ship, and I think that is a good, so far, not easily answered question, Bob, is like, how did they arrive? An overland journey has always, certainly when Keith and Bob and David were doing the whole discussion about the Battle of Baden and everything, there was the whole talk about, well, how did they get there, right? And no one seriously entertained the idea that they came overland. So I agree, there's an open question as to how they got here for this, but
I don't think it was one way they came. What you're talking about is a vast force of Saxons. I think you had a group going by sea, and I think you had a group over land. It's logic. You think of it.
I buy into that. They don't all have to come together. They come by different separate routes for certain. Like people attending conferences do nowadays. They don't all come, from London. You've got people from all over, and they come by different routes. What Vortigern was looking for was he could see, having introduced the Saxons in to help him fight his wars with the Picts and the Gaels, as they say. He's rewarded them for their help there, and the Saxon then can see that, I think, that he was weak, and they were. I think what he was looking for was to come to an accommodation whereby he could stay in power.
Yes.
And the Saxons could get what they want, which was to come in and take more land and bring in more people. So I think he was looking for an accommodation. So, to begin with Keith's point, was he playing was he like a double agent here? So he's telling all of the people that he's notionally commander, right? And we'll get together here, guys. And was he in on it as well as part of his a bigger plan to retain control? I don't know.
He was a puppet king, wasn't he?
But there's certainly some questions here. And again, the peace conference, why hold it in South Wales rather than England? I mean, the mainstream would say that it was held on Salisbury Plain. And if you go back to the beginning of my presentation here, what you're looking at there is Stonehenge.
Ah.
Yeah, the stones here at Stonehenge in that illustration there, because that's where traditionally the mainstream put it. But again, that's still taking it out of the area where the Saxons were at that time, which were in Kent and the Isle of Thanet. So that's still removed from there. One of the reasons why it was held in South Wales perhaps could be, it's like if you want to borrow something from your neighbour, you don't expect your neighbour to come to you and say, "Here, have my lawnmower." You go and see your neighbour. If you want something from someone, you've got to put yourself out. And it could be that's why the Saxons had to come to Wales. If you want something from us, you got to put yourself out and come and see us. We're not coming to come and see you and have a peace conference down in Kent. You've got to put yourself out and come and see us if you want peace.
But it's been a fascinating discussion, and I think, Bob, you've presented some really compelling arguments for the location of the peace conference. And I just, this, of course, as we know, this subject is completely off limits for most academia today, because this wouldn't even be a discussion, because nobody wants to bring up the fact that the Saxons and the native Britons had this terrible falling out, right? It might warrant a Wikipedia page, a brief mention, but it's all just speculative, right? It's all sort of folklorish. And so it's hard to imagine anybody in academia taking it seriously enough to, having watched our little Zoom, for them to actually go and investigate and put all the resources on it, because the last thing anybody wants to invoke these days is conflict between peoples. And they wouldn't want to incite any more conflict between the Welsh and the English, because the whole point is to come around to the very beginning of our conversation. And I think perhaps before we had even begun recording, Bob, we were talking about printing presses and the English suppression of the Welsh language. I mean, I think we can all agree that assimilation is a good thing, but eradication of cultures is probably not a great thing. So somewhere you have to find some kind of balance. I guess we're struggling with it today, but they definitely don't want to bring up issues with the past, which is why I think all these stories, all these documentaries about the Dark Ages tend to gloss over the Saxon invasion now, and they're just trying to reposition it as a gentle migration of folks into the islands, as opposed to great conflicts as the histories tell us existed. But this has been a great presentation, Bob. We really appreciate it. And I thank everybody that participated. Monica, you've been very quiet, and
I'm just listening.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob and Paul, and all the participants on the night the Zoom recording was made. We had a very entertaining question and answer session, which I hope you'll enjoy hearing in full when I upload the video to the YouTube channel. Bob has seen more from the LiDAR on second look at the presentation. Parts 1 and 2 of the road trip by Legolas, John and Rob are now on the YouTube channel in their own playlist, as mentioned previously. A book is planned and the travelogue videos are in support of this. And don't forget, Rob Shaw's book, The Architecture of Power, is available from www.cymroglyphics.com, together with the original The Walking and other Wilson and Blackett books, and hopefully the soon new to be in existence PDF format books. As I say every week, everyone is welcome to contribute a video, and we're always asking for new content. Angie or myself will act as liaison to publish them to the YouTube channel. But if you publish straight to Facebook, let us know, and that we can put your video on the YouTube group channel. Just message us by finding us, as I've said before, on the Facebook group page. We're under members. If you've got video content in your film or a PowerPoint presentation, it's gonna get into the Sunday show because we like video. I'm reaching out to our experts for interviews. So if you've got something to present to the group and I haven't made contact with you yet, why not get in touch and to speak with me? And the amount of talking about the name Peter in the chat and stone, etc., goes on and on in the chat, very detailed. discussion, that might make a great presentation. So as soon as Marshall finishes her index, then maybe we'll hopefully get Marshall to make us another presentation. Thank you very much. So let's take a look at today's chat, as I just mentioned from the chat. Started off with Richard Tofield asking, are Saxons related to the Isari or Sari, as Judas Iscariot may have been? I thought I read in one of the W&B books that Iscariot means swordsman. So later in the chat they were talking about sax being knife. So very close, isn't it? And in one of the internet books I've got on Kindle, I think the guy who's talking about the lost disciples, I think he mentioned that that Saxon might have been the 10th or rearguard tribe of the lost tribes, and whilst the others got themselves over to Britain, or half of them did, to Britain as the Cymry, maybe the one lot went through Central Europe to end up in part of Germany, where they were the rearguard being Isaac's sons. Isaac's sons, Saxons. That was his conclusion. Patrick said those who lived in Twisclands were called Sax men because they were always armed with knives called a sax against wild animals, etc. We know what the etc is. Man sharpens a man on man. So I think I saw a documentary where they were saying that the Germans were called Germans from spear, Ger being a spear, so they're spearmen. Maybe there's something in it. A better one explained when I mentioned about Enkidu. He said it's from the Bronze Age lore regarding Gilgamesh's wild men nemesis, and who became his friend. Gary Taylor said Enki is the Sumerian deity, and the Bronze Age was mentioned because at that time Wales had industrialised mining and were trading with Asia Minor, where the Sumerian tale is placed. I do remember now reading Enki, and I certainly know that Gilgamesh is the equivalent of Noah. Marshall Abraham's on the road video question, on the subject of the road on Mynyddig the Gaia, question Bob, just say it's a Roman road. She questioned Bob, did he just say it's a Roman road? Well, that one will run forever, I think. So it's welcome to Scotland, Sri Lanka and Ontario this evening. We have other Canadian members or supporters. There was some discussion over the meaning of the name Peter, as in St. Peter. It ended up as pebble becoming rock. I like that one, that conclusion. It was a very interesting dialogue. Dean Morgan said Keith made a good point and asked, was Vertigan a turncoat? It was Vertigan the traitor. Follow the money, as they say. He ended up the only lord in, apart from the guy in Gloucester, and then the sons, obviously, of all the royalty and lordships murdered. Maybe the Saxons plan to come back with a bigger army. Well, they definitely did. Nearly 90 years later. That was the Baden campaign. Gary Taylor pointed out that Vortigern's security let them in with their long knives. I did several years working as a steward down at the Millennium Principality Stadium. Something to do when I retired. Of course, when I retired, I didn't fancy doing it. And you regularly had to do the pat-down searches to look for anything, I suppose, on the Olympics events in particular, and probably on the European Cup final. It was a very interesting one, that was. There's an old film I saw where there was British soldiers in the last war, last World War, and the German counterpart, and they were all experts. They were all the top end of soldiery, and the one British soldier had his gun pointed at the German that he'd taken prisoner, who had his hands in the air, and then you read the soldiers' minds. So the one soldier was thinking, and you heard his thoughts, and and the other one, the one thinking first, may have been the German soldier, and he's thinking out inside his mind, saying, "And when you turn your back, I've got like a barbecue skewer hidden in the collar, and you turn round, and that'll be inside you." And the British guy then is also thinking, as he's looking at him, pointing his gun at his midriff, and he's saying, "You think I'm going to turn round so that you can stab me with that barbecue skewer you've got hidden in your collar." The bottom line is, men of swords and knives and combat knew that the others would have had knives on their person. So the British side must have trusted the security, which would have been Vortigern's personal security, to have found weapons, and they didn't. So somebody pointed out then, did Vortigern get, or somebody asked, did Vortigern get killed on the day? I think that was answered in the presentation. He didn't get killed on the day. So it does point to follow the money, and it does point a finger of suspicion towards Vortigern, doesn't it? That was Dean's comment. Dean pointed out it's easy to make sure that no weapons could be taken in. Yeah. Well, that was the chat. Very interesting, wasn't it? Well, we're near the end of the show for this evening, so we'll put the piano and violin music as almost as we had it at the beginning. Not everybody got to hear the piano playing at the beginning. They'll hear it now. Well, not everybody likes their name being mentioned on the feedback on the chat, even when it's anonymized. Paul loved the piano playing, and as I did, I thought that was marvellous. Watching the way the fingers move up and down the keys, just incredible, isn't it? You see the way, I think it was Xavi, put his left hand over his right to go higher up the pitch. Very interesting. So thank you, boys. We conclude the live chat and close the show with a second song from Bethan B. Parker and State of Fame performing Highway to Hell. I love the clapping at the end with the phone still in the hand. Brilliant. Very talented, yeah, and very entertaining. Well, that's it for today. Thank you all for joining us from around the world and locally. And I hope you enjoyed our time together. I know I did. Thank you to Angela and the boys, and to all the volunteers working behind the scenes on both the group media platforms. So if it's Auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, ciao, nostar, and see you next time. And remember, seek and you will find.
Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it informative. Britain's Hidden History Group has so much more going on our YouTube channel. The one you're watching now, there's a live stream, 8 o'clock UK time every Sunday. We speak to people like Wilson and Blackett, reprint their old books and help produce new ones. We go researching to the tops of mountains, all the way down to the bottoms of caves. busily recording the books. You can listen to them as well, and looking at mysteries and working out what we're not being taught in schools and preserving it, because the physical and written evidence is rapidly disappearing. You can also find out how to read ancient writing and hieroglyphs using the Welsh language. It's amazing. There's a Facebook group where this is being discussed. Along with a website, you can buy the books and help us. Also, as you can see, there's now a Patreon page where just a few pounds a month will make all the difference in trying to keep the project going and preserve this history for future generations, and also to find out for ourselves what is going on, what is Britain's hidden history. So until the next time, Heddwch!